Hello, hello, I'm Harlow Harlow, and welcome back to my channel and to the 5th episode of Cosmetics and Classics. Before we begin this episode, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you already haven't. And yeah, I feel like first, before we even begin this episode, I kind of owe you guys a little bit of an explanation. So my last video was quite a while ago. It was my Halloween video, which I did on 1976's Carrie. And I believe in that video, I said I'm going to be back. I'm going to do something for Noirvember. I have holiday plans. And I did. I definitely did. But you know what? Life really got in the way kind of again. My job is very, exhausts the F out of me. I, work in bridal. I'm a bridal stylist, and on my days off, especially the last few months, I've just been so exhausted to the point where I just sleep most of the days when I have off. And, yeah, I've really been trying to work on how to get my energy back and get a little healthier, and I feel like I'm in a really good place right now, and I'm in a good place to get back into making cosmetics and classics and start talking about movies again and putting on some makeup while I do it. And I'm coming back with a banger and a half. We are talking about 1975's Grey Gardens. Now, if you don't know what Grey Gardens is, let me tell you with this little introduction that I have for Grey Gardens. Okay, I'm excited for this one. Okay, ready? Enter the world of Edith Ewing Bouvier Beale and her daughter, Edith Bouvier Beale, aka Big and Little Edie, who were once the top of New York's high society and now live in a dilapidated mansion called Grey Gardens, located in East Hampton. That was good, right? Tell me I got you excited. Comment below. Did that synopsis get you intrigued? I don't know why. For me, if I listened to that, I'd be like, ooh, let's enter that world. Let's do it. Come on, let's go through. So I chose to do Grey Gardens this time around because I just love that movie so much. And the day that I decided to, that I was going to rewatch it and rewatch it for this series, it was a really gray, gloomy day outside, very cold here in New York City. And I just need to spend some time with my favorite aunties. And while watching it, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna talk about this movie because there's so much to talk about with this movie. And on top of it, it's one of my personal favorites. It's such a classic. It's such a cult classic. It's such a, it can be a camp classic. It's a queer classic. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about it with y'all. So we're gonna jump into it right now. And for today's makeup look, I'm going for a very soft beat. I didn't want to go into too significant beat because I try to stick with the movie and what was going on, and neither women wear makeup throughout the movie as far as I can tell. So yeah, I just wanted to do something very, very soft. And just warning, I am not a makeup artist. I am just your grandfather's young bimbo who likes to paint their face instead of a canvas just for fun and laughs. And either way, I always look beautiful, period. So, yeah, let's get started. So, Grey Gardens, as I said, was released in 1975. It was a documentary, as I said, and didn't have the huge studio release because it was an independent film. It did get shown at the Cannes Film Festival. Cannes or Cannes? I forget. Whatever. I think it is Cannes. Actually, you know what? It is Cannes. I'm wrong again. Ugh. So rare. But we digress. In 1976, although it was not selected to be a part of the festival's competition, which, to me, this movie, if I was a voting member of Cannes, you say Cannes, I say Cannes, copyright. I would have not only selected this to be in the competition, but for me, this movie would have won the Palme d'Or, hands down. Which, if you don't know, that's, the big prize at Cannes. Cannes. I'm going with Cannes. Sticking with Cannes. So the movie stars, as I said, Edith Ewing Bouvier Beale and her daughter, Edith Bouvier Beale, aka Little and Big Edie, or Big and Little Edie, yeah, because mother first, then daughter. So yeah, big, little Edie. The Edies, as we're gonna call them. And the movie was directed by David and Albert Mayseles. Now, this movie has an interesting backstory of how this all happened, so let's get into it. Albert and David Mayseles were documentary filmmakers who were also brothers. They really started to get some recognition in the late 60s and early 70s with their films The Salesman and Gimme Shelter, which were both released in 1970, and both were known for their style of documentary making where there were no interviews, there wasn't anyone really explaining what was going on, it was just them, their cameras, following their subjects, and that was it. So, and that's, like, I think Grey Gardens is, like, exactly that. Like, I guess, like, Edie, Little Edie is sort of, like, if we're gonna call someone the narrator of Grey Gardens, it is Little Edie, because we hear from her the most. But, yeah, like, there's no, like, proper narration of Grey Gardens. It is just the women in their daily lives. Which, my God, is it fascinating to watch? Is it fascinating to watch? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we digress. So as I was saying, the brothers Mayseles, already up-and-coming documentarians, especially in the New York scene. So eventually they met Lee Radswell. Now, if you don't know who Lee Radswell is, don't worry, I will tell you. She was an American socialite and just all-around cool person. And she was the younger sister of Jackie Kennedy, which, by the way, Edith and Jackie are the niece and first cousin of Big and Little Edie. Fun fact. That's partially why they were so you can imagine, they really were, like, when I say they were the top of, like, the echelon of New York society in the time period that they were, like, at their peak, they really, really, really were those girls. Now, come on now. And at some point, Lee approached the Mayseles brothers to make a documentary about the Bouvier family. And while doing research or, like, talking about making this documentary, she wanted to take David and Albert to Grey Gardens, because Grey Gardens was where she and her sister spent most of their summers. And it was a really big part of their lives. So they wanted to introduce David and Albert, well, really mainly just show them where they spent those summers in the Hamptons. But by doing that, they also met Little and Big Edie. The Edies. We're just going to call them the Edies. Little and Big Edie over and over again. That can be a lot to say. You know what I mean, man? You know what I mean, man? So eventually that project never really happened. I believe they did film some stuff, and I think they even might have filmed some stuff at Grey Gardens, but that footage has never been found, and I would love to see that footage, because that would have been David and Albert Mayseles' introduction to the Edies. So I can't imagine when they got there and met them, they were like, who are these people? Because the Edies are so colorful and whimsical, and they still acted like they were the top of the top. They were these amazing society ladies, but in reality, they were living in this, like, 28-bedroom mansion that was falling to pieces with cats and raccoons running around all over the place. So, like, the discombobulation was discombobulating, I'm sure, for Brothers Mayseles. So that project eventually, as I said, got shelved, and if anyone knows where that footage is, please let me know, but we digress. But, however, the Brothers Mayseles still had interest in making a documentary, but not about anyone else in the Bouvier family except the Edies. As I said, they found them intriguing, which, like, how could you not? So the introduction between the Mayseles brothers and the Edies was sometime around 1971, 1972, but they eventually came back and approached them with the documentary starting around 1974, and the film came out in 1975. So, you know, a few years in between when they initially met and when the documentary started to happen, but that's the case. That's the case, and that's how they met them. Now, I said that the Edies were very colorful people, and sure, there's a lot of many colorful people out in the world, but why them? Why did the Brothers Mayseles want to make a documentary about them? Well, as you can kind of piece together the little things I've already said about them, they make quite interesting subjects for a documentary. And I'm going to talk to you about them now and give you a little, just like a little brief biography of the Edies and their lives and how they got to the place that they were in right before and during the making of Grey Gardens. So Edith Ewing Bouvier Beale was born, oh crap, wrong color. So Edith Ewing Bouvier Beale was born on October 5th of 1895, and her daughter Edith, aka Edie, was born on November 17th of 1917. Now, the two women were natural-born entertainers. They wanted to be entertainers so badly, and it really, like, you can see throughout the film whenever they get a chance to sing or dance, it truly just gave them such joy and life, and, you know, whether they had, like, the greatest talent or not, I would say the women were talent. Were they the greatest talents I've ever seen? That I don't know for sure. Hard to say. But I think that they were both very talented, but their star quality, my God, like, these women had star quality, and up, like, the wazoo. And I truly, truly believe that if they really did get a chance to, like, go out and try to become what they wanted to become, I think it might happen for them just because, like, you know, it's the common tale that the greatest talent might not become the greatest star because they, you know, star quality is a whole different thing from talent. And my God, did these women have star quality. So Big Edie wanted to be the singer. She wanted to be a singer very, very badly. And before she married her husband, Phelan Beale, in 1917, she really did go out and try to pursue a career in singing. And when she and Phelan eventually separated in 1931, she got to retain their Hampton's home, which was called Grey Gardens, which was purchased by Phelan and Edith in 1923, I believe. And whenever Edith had a party or a get-together, she would always sing. She hosted recitals to invite people to come in and listen to her sing. She had an accompanist that she was very close to, which she called the most brilliant man that she ever knew. And little Edie wanted to be a dancer and actress. And she did pursue this while she lived in New York for about 5 years during the late 40s and early 50s. And during that time period, too, she also modeled, and she was just, you know, she was the girl about town. She was really beautiful. They called her Body Beautiful Beale, which is true. They did call her Body Beautiful Beale. Oh, I want to be called Body Beautiful Beale, even though my name isn't Beale. One is, like, what's the closest for, like, Body Beautiful Beale, but Harlow? Hottie Hot Harlow. That's me. I'm Hottie Hot Harlow. And what? Boop. Now, Edith almost seemed to have, like, some possibility of making a career. She almost got an audition, or it's unclear to me if she was actually invited to audition for whatever this production would have been. It's never actually said, so maybe it was just, like, talked and, like, you know what I'm thinking? Now that I'm thinking about it, sorry, this is just all hitting me. I wonder if, so this is the thing, Edith, during the film, the women kind of drop hints and little nuggets of their past here and there. And during Grey Gardens, she talks about how she almost got discovered by a man named Max Gordon, who was a very famous Broadway producer. He discovered my queen, Judy Holliday, who's somewhere, she's right there, right there, and she's up there too. And she's on my arm. Yeah, right there. Oh, I have a Grey Gardens tattoo too. This is little Edie's magnifying glass. Should tell you how much I really love this movie, because I really, really do. So anyway, but little Edie always said that she almost got this chance to audition for Max Gordon. Max Gordon told her she was funnier than Judy Holliday, but she never actually said what the project was. So maybe there was no project. Maybe she just met him in passing, and she was so lively and charming when they met, which I could so imagine that being the case, that Max Gordon said in passing, like, you know what, kid, you're as funny as Judy Holliday. Nay, funnier than Miss Holliday. So who knows how that actually went down. And frankly, if it went down, I love my Edies, but let's be honest, some of the things that they say, there's no fact, there's no way to really prove what they're saying, so, and I think a lot of the things that they said were probably true or had truths in what they were saying, but we'll never know. We'll never know. We'll just believe what we want to believe. And I want to believe it all. Oh. So Edie stayed in New York City till 1952 when she moved back to Grey Gardens to be with her mother. From what it seems to be at her mother's request that she come and move back. And that's really when I think the spiral started to happen. So so let's kind of fast forward to 1971 because we really don't know exactly what was going on in either Edie's lives between that point. They really did just become these recluses who lived in this house, and yeah, it just went haywire. Like, I feel like that's really the only way to discuss it. So Grey Gardens, when they first got it and during its glory days, was this beautiful 28-bedroom mansion in East Hampton, New York, which is a community, like, I think the northern tip or eastern tip of Long Island, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a very well-known vacation area, especially for the rich. I have not been to the Hamptons yet. I really want to go just because it's like, I just feel like as someone who lives in New York, it's that thing that you just gotta do when when you live in New York. Like, oh, darling, I can't hang out this weekend because this weekend I'm going to the Hamptons. Like, I want to have like that moment at least once in my life. But this was the house that Big Edie got during their separation from Phelan Beale and their eventual divorce, which happened like 16, 17 years after they fully separated. And they just did not maintain the house. See, Edith, during her separation, got child support, but she did not get alimony. So she didn't really get any money, which she then had to just rely, I guess, on whatever money she had. And that all went very quickly. And they, of course, didn't have enough money to maintain the mansion. And in 1971, Suffolk County Police raided Grey Gardens because they were getting so many complaints about how it was this just horror show that happened of just this beautiful mansion turning into decay and being basically ready to fall apart at the, if you just went up to Grey Garden, if you knocked on the door, knock, 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 little Ease, may I have some milk? This is your neighbor, knock, knock, can I borrow some sugar? Knock, knock. The whole house would probably have just fallen apart into pieces. Like, it was in that bad a shape, and there were cats running everywhere, there were raccoons, there was no working plumbing, like, it was just a horror show. It was just awful, and it's awful to think that these two women were living like this. And they were so, entrapped in their own making, if you will. And I think that has a lot to do with, their own sort of bond. This is the thing, the bond, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but the bond between these women is both beautiful and horrifying at the same time. And I think that their codependency and also lack of, admitting that something is going on and something was wrong led them to where that they eventually went. And as I said, Suffolk County Police raided Grey Gardens. They were about to evict the Edies. They said, they were like, Miss Ma'ams, there are other places to live, and we can help you. Well, actually, no, they probably weren't helping them. They didn't care. They just wanted to get them out there. And this did make the news. This was, as little Edie would say, quite the scandal, really. And it just was this thing about, Jackie Kennedy Onassis's family living in squalor and, these past beautiful society women now living in, as I said, a dilapidated mansion full of cats and raccoons and no working plumbing. It was a scandal. It was quite the scandal, really. And eventually the family, aka Jackie and Lee, stepped in and helped clean up Grey Gardens, and they provided little Edie and big Edie with $30,000, which took care of all the repairs for Grey Gardens, as well as helping them pay off certain back taxes that they owed. And they did give the two a stipend because, as I said, both women's trusts had run out by that point. And this all happened in, as I said, 1971. And as I said earlier, the Mayseles Brothers didn't meet them till about 1971, 1972, and did not offer them the opportunity for a documentary till 1974. So there had been some time gap in between there, but nothing really got better. Like, you know what I mean? Like, nothing really improved with either of them, or the house in that matter. Like, yes, like, the house was now livable, it had electricity, it had plumbing, but, like, it didn't get better. You know what I mean? It didn't really get better, but they were still so charming and so lively and incredible that the Mayseles wanted to make a documentary about them. So, and when they offered the documentary about them, the Edies were like, duh. Well, little Edie was like, duh. Big Edie was like, but eventually she got on board. Eventually she did get on board. And filming began in, I believe, the summer of 1974. So we're going to talk about this movie. We're not going to do it in the way that I've done it in the past, where it's like I literally break down scene by scene. We're just going to really just talk about the movie. So the movie itself, I would call colorfully dark. Like, it's colorful because the Edies are so colorful, but when you're really looking around and you're hearing how the women interact with each other and what they are and where they are, and kind of, even though like the things that they say are very colorful, entertaining, and also very thought-provoking, also just very sad. And this movie is just like a proper Mayseles Brothers documentary. As I said, they really kind of came from the school of cinema verite, which is a documentary type style that really is just about capturing truths. Like, it isn't trying to make things beautiful and cover up any truths. It's really just like in your face reality and showing subjects in like their truest form. And that is definitely how they show the Edies. And it really is just like a day-to-day diary of like what they say, what they do, and mainly about their relationship. This movie really is about the relationship of a mother and daughter, like, first and foremost. And we get like really good glances at where the two were in their lives at this time and how they really reflected on the things that happened in their lives. And I would say their relationship, like, it was, as I said, it was beautiful because, like, you could tell that these women were each other's soulmates. Like, Edie and Edie, like, they were that mother and daughter that were like this. Like, they really were each other's other in a lot of ways. But also, it was extremely toxic in a lot of ways, too. It was very, very codependent, especially on Big Edie's part. I think in a lot of ways, no offense to her, but I think that the unhealthiest thing she did for Edie was make her move from New York. Because throughout the movie, you hear Edie kind of really talk about how she really feels like she missed out on life, on opportunities, on being an independent woman in New York, and how much she hates the quiet of the East Hamptons, how she misses the sounds of like garbage trucks rattling and street noise. And, you know, she just seemed like she was meant to be this like proper New York girl. Like, she was gonna be a proper New York girl. That's really what she was gonna be. Whether she became a star or not, one thing was for sure: New York and Edie seemed to go really well with each other, which I relate to a lot. As someone who grew up in Houston, in a very quiet area of Houston, to then move to both Chicago and New York, I can't do quiet like that. Like, I need to know that there's things going outside and of my apartment and exciting things. And like, I live near like some bars, and I'll hear like the music like at 3 a.m, and at certain points I'm like, okay, I need to go to sleep. I have to go to work the next day. But also I'm like, I love it. I love knowing that people are out and about and there's things happening outside my walls. And if I want to like walk out and go, they're there. So, and that's like very much what Edie was feeling and expressed during her, during the documentary when they were filming. So yeah, on one hand, their relationship, beautiful. On the other hand, not beautiful. one of my favorite parts about this movie are the things that the Edies said. Now, I kind of mentioned before that the Edies really did say some just colorful, witty, sharp, and also very dark and thought-provoking and sort of melancholic things. And here are just some quotes for you guys. Like, listen to all this. So this first sentence is is Big Edie. The cat's going to the bathroom right behind that portrait. Little Edie. God, isn't that awful? Big Edie. No, I'm glad he's going. I'm glad someone's doing what they want to do. Like, that alone. Saying that, like, I'm glad this cat is going to the bathroom behind this portrait because this cat is doing what they want to do. They're asserting independence. Like, that's wild. That's wild. But, like, so deep. Wild but deep. That's what I would call the Edies. Wild and deep. Some other quotes from the Edies were, but see, in dealing with me, the relatives, they didn't realize they were dealing with a staunch character. And I tell you, there's nothing worse than dealing with a staunch woman. S-T-A-U-N-C-H. There's nothing worse, I tell you. They don't weaken, no matter what. It's very difficult to keep the line between the past and the present. You understand. I only care about 3 things: the Catholic Church, swimming, and dancing. We better check on Mother and the cats. She's a lot of fun. I hope she doesn't die. I hate to spend another winter here. Oh, another winter. And of course, Mother wanted me to come out in a kimono, so we had quite a fight. Like, just those little nuggets of quotes, I think, says so much about the way that they thought. Like, they just said whatever they wanted, but the things that they said had so much depth and thought to them. You know, saying things like, I hope Mother doesn't die soon. And having to spend another winter at Grey Gardens, and the thought of having to maybe do that by herself, which would have been literally the first time in her 50 years of life that she would have had to spend some time alone, or almost 50 years of life. And especially for me, I think for little Edie, most of these quotes, actually all these quotes, except for the first little conversation piece I gave y'all, is all little Edie. I think for me, the thing that I think says the most about little Edie is the staunch quote, because she was staunch. She was a staunch, strong character. And, she never weakened. Little Edie never weakened. That confidence, that need for, to be herself and to be free of societal norms. In the very, very beginning of the documentary, there's an overlay of little Edie's voice talking about living in East Hampton and the expectations of being in society and being in East Hampton, those expectations that are put on you, and how, as she says, it was a mean, nasty Republican town. And, so I think that says so much about how she just always felt like the black sheep of society, not just her family, but society. And I think that's also another reason why she and her mother were so close, because I'm sure in a way, Big Edie felt a little bit ostracized as well, felt like a little bit of a black sheep among these societal women. Here she is giving these parties where she's singing and dancing for everyone. And, even though she's hosting, it's more just like, come and watch me perform, which is, I can imagine for society women, they're like, oh, there goes that Bouvier Beale lady again, singing and dancing. Why isn't she just serving the tea? I think that they, because they were so, the importance of being themselves is so much more important to them than anything else. And I think that caused a lot of friction with not just their family, but with the world that they knew. And that really comes out in pretty much everything that they say without them actually directly saying that. So we gotta talk about the singing and dancing in this film. Now, there is a lot of singing and dancing in this film because, as I said earlier, that was their dream. And for them, when they were on camera, it was kind of like their way of like, okay, here's our chance. This could be a big break for us, this documentary. So we're going to show off all our talents. And I'm going to say my favorite Edith moment my favorite Big Edie moment is when she sings Tea for Two in bed. And that's actually probably my favorite singing and dancing moment in the whole film, period. There's something just so captivating about this woman who is in her 80s, and she never leaves her bed except to go outside once in a while. And she fully performs Tea for Two for the cameras, for the Mayseles Brothers. She starts off with a hat, and she knows how to take off the hat at the right time. She knows how to kind of have like little speaking moments in between when she sings. And the best part is when she eventually finishes the song, she takes the hat off, and then she takes a comb and she starts brushing it like this with her long gray hair, and it's just like, oh, can't you see how happy we could be? Like, it's just such a, like, wow moment. Like, it's, I think, the real first moment of, like, these women, I think for audiences, it's like, oh, this is not just, like, they're not treating this as, like, yeah, this is what I used to do, and I'm going to sing along to my old vinyls that have recordings of me singing back 50 years ago. I'm going to perform now like it's the greatest audition of my life. And she really does. And it's just beautiful. And of course it's sad, because it's just like, you're listening to this and you're seeing her really perform, and you're like, well, this is her biggest chance. This is the most we're ever going to really see her perform anywhere, you know? And I'm glad that for Edith, who really wanted to be a singer, she tried before, as I said, before she got married, to become a legitimate singer. She, this was immortalized. Her singing was immortalized on film, and not just a film, but one of the most iconic American documentaries to ever be made. So I'm happy that she has that. Now, Edith's big moment, little Edie's big moment, definitely is the flag dance. And I would say that flag dance is probably the most replicated, the most redone, the most satirized. That's the word I'm looking for. Satirized, imitated, depending on the person who's doing it. Probably mocked too, which is so mean. Don't mock the Edies. And it's just her dancing around, just kind of like waving a flag around the entryway of Grey Gardens, and just waving the flag around, just kind of moving it around. She's wearing, I'm actually literally wearing, I am wearing it. I'm literally wearing the outfit that little Edie wears. A black turtleneck tucked into some black tights. And she has a red, white, and blue scarf over her head, which we will talk about the fashions of Grey Gardens. Trust me, we will get into little Edie's headwear, because that's very important to the fashions of this film, and believe me, there are fashions, darling. And we just see her moving, but like, here's the thing, it's nothing like major. It's nothing like, wow, this is the Ginger Rogers that got away. Like, it's nothing like that per se, you know. It's not like, oh my god, Rita Hayworth. But like, again, she has so much charisma and charm and star quality that you just can't keep your eyes off of her. And it just shows that, yes, maybe she wasn't, I would say I love her and I love this moment, but it isn't like the best tell of her dancing abilities. So it's hard to judge what she was like as a dancer. You know what I mean? Like with Big Edie, we have the singing moment, which we could at least hear her sing live and also hear the recordings that she used to make. So we have a pretty good tell. And by the way, Big Edie was a good singer, I think. Like, it was very of its time kind of singing, and it wasn't, like, okay, maybe not good singer, but, like, not the worst. Like, if I heard her sing, if I went over to their house and heard her sing, I'd be like, what a nice little soprano voice she had. Like, good for her. Good for her. But we digress. But yeah, Edie's dancing abilities, this isn't the best tell, but my god, it shows what a star she was. And how I probably, once again, if she had pursued it, someone would have seen that star quality and been like, you know what, we can teach her how to dance better, or we can teach her how to sing better, or do whatever she wants better, because My God, this woman is a star. A star, darling, a star. I'll make you a star, kid. I'm gonna make you a star. Should I have been an agent in 1930s New York? Damn it. Now, I mentioned the fashions, and we gotta talk about the fashions. So, no offense to Big Edie, but we're not gonna be talking about her at all during this, because, as I said, she was an 80-year-old woman in bed for most of this time, so she's either in like a nightgown, or she had like a towel wrapped around her, and that was it. So, I mean, stunning, don't get me wrong, but we have to talk about the fashion icon of this film, Little Edie. So Little Edie's fashion, I think, is just so distinctive because, once again, she wasn't following any fashion trends at the time. She wasn't following any rules. She was making up her own rules. She was coming up and creating her own styles, starting especially most famously her head wraps. So Little Edie suffered from alopecia, which can cause major hair loss. So instead of wearing wigs, which I'm assuming what most women, especially at that time, would have done, she would just wrap her head, and literally almost anything that could be made into a head wrap. And when I say anything, I mean towels, t-shirts, and long sleeve shirts that she would just like tie in the back, and scarves, of course. But like, the mind of this person, like, she just created looks and made them out and made things from nothing and turned them into something. And they were always colorful. They always coordinated with her outfits. She always had like some maybe like brooches or something in there to like, one, make sure that everything stays in place, but to decorate it even more so. She also was like the queen of mixing patterns and big, bold patterns, like huge patterns, but they always made sense and they worked together. I think, that time and trend, I think anytime you see that trend of like mixing patterns, or when that was a trend, I really think you could trace that back to Little Edie, because, correct me if I'm wrong, I never saw anyone doing that before her. I never saw anyone mixing and matching patterns so big and so bold in that way. And this is the mid-70s that we're talking about, when there were big, bold, beautiful, saturated colors and prints going on in fashion during that time period. But she just did it in a way that was so uniquely her, but at the same time, too, the colors all really went together. Sometimes it was a little bit more of like a monochromatic type of situation, but there's still like, oh my God, just so cool and amazing. I think my favorite look of Little Edie's during the movie is probably definitely the red look, that like all red look that she wears on the porch. And also there's this like blue look that she wears when she's like going through some photos and portraits in her mother's room. It's just like the fashion of Little Edie. She really is, without hyperbole, an icon of fashion, and she has inspired designers. You can just Google, and I'll put some photos in here, obviously, of the designers that she inspired, but she's just inspired fashion in a way that I think that even she would not have expected to fully inspire, which is inspiring. That is definitely inspiring. So I talked about the relationship between the Edies, and, we talked about the looks that they brought, the fashion, we talked about the quotes, the singing, the dancing, but I'm going to jump back into the relationship. So as I said, it was beautiful, but also very not beautiful, and I think most people would classify it as a classic codependent relationship. And I think, there's a lot of talk about this movie, and when this movie came out, it was actually kind of controversial, because a lot of people to this day find the film to be exploitative. And I am not a mental health expert. I'm really not going to get into that, because I just don't feel like it's my place. There is no need to, armchair diagnose these women who were never diagnosed properly if they had any And I'm just going to leave it there. You know what? I'm just going to leave it there. It's not my place to discuss that, and I'm not going to be that person that discusses it. But there is a lot of discussion of the mental state of both the Edies, to the point that actually I think when you Google Grey Gardens, that's the first question, is what mental health issues did the Edies have? Like, it's very prominent because they're so out of, you know, they're so not on this planet, and they're so not, they don't fully seem to realize the situation that they're both in, that it comes off feeling very exploitative. And I think when you are making a documentary, and especially the cinema verite style that the Mayseles Brothers did, it can be very exploitative, because it really is just like letting these women live their lives, but also live their lives in a way that maybe not be the healthiest. There was actually an article done during that time period of when the film came out in the New York Times by a man named Walter Goodman, and the article was titled Cinema Verite or Sideshow, and he called the women, the portrayal of the Edies, grotesque, and he also questioned, would there be any interest in a documentary about the two of them if there wasn't the connection to Jackie Kennedy Onassis? And I think that's a really good point that he makes, because, like, yeah, would they have even made this movie if they weren't the relatives of one of the most famous women in history? And this is my opinion, I think that if they had found them on their own, the Mayseles Brothers, I think that they still would have made the documentary about the two of them, because they are so, again, they are just so special. They are such special ladies. And they had such charm, and they were so colorful, and they just always were putting on shows, no matter what was going on. But, again, yeah, I can understand why grotesque might be the word. I wouldn't call the women grotesque. I would call maybe the situation that they were in to be grotesque, and to show it on screen for profit grotesque. However, the Mayseles Brothers, throughout their lives, Albert died in about 2015, and David died in, I believe, the late 80s. And throughout their entire lives, whenever they gave interviews about Grey Gardens, they always talked about how much they love the Edies and what love that they have for both Big and Little Edie. And the story and the time that they had with them was very, very special. And I really do believe that. I do believe it was very genuine. I don't think, for me personally, I don't think that the Mayseles Brothers had any bad intentions. And I think that says a lot, because let's be honest, 70s was the time of exploitation in film, period, all the way around, from this type of filmmaking to major studio scripted releases. Like, their exploitation was all over 70s filmmaking, especially in the United States during this time period. So, I don't know. Comment below. Tell me what you think about it. I understand that, you know, there is an exploitative layer to this movie. I mean, just solely for the situation that they're in. But for me, this film, and I think this comes from how a lot of queer people see this movie, and why it's such a queer classic in queer film history, because these women, first of all, as I said, they both kind of didn't care what society's standards and rules were, and were going to live their lives the way they wanted to live them and be themselves no matter what the cost of that was going to be. And by doing that, they were sort of black sheep in society and in their own family, which I think most queer people can relate to on some level. And I think that, you know, that is just, there's a lot of beauty in that. There's a lot of, I think, resiliency in a way, which I know that sounds wild when, after especially everything I just described of the living conditions, but there is a resiliency in there. And I don't know, I admire it. I admire that resiliency, even if it might have come out of some form of alleged mental illness that I'm not going to get into, or, you know, delusions, which once again, not going to get into. But watching it, you know, it just, you know, especially after 2020 and having to live alone during that time period and living alone during the Pandorama, you know, you have to kind of create a little bit of magic for yourselves, especially if you're kind of on your own on a lonely island. And that's what these women did. So, I don't know, it's complicated. It's complicated, starring Meryl Streep and Alec Baldwin. So the film was first shown at the Paris Theater here in New York City. And as I said, it was considered to be controversial. There were articles and reviews like the one Mr. Goodman gave in the New York Times, but also very good ones. Roger Ebert gave the film 4 stars and said, and I quote, "Grey Gardens is one of the most haunting documentaries in a long time. Preserves their strange existence, and we're pleased that it does. It expands our notions of the possibilities. It is about 2 classic eccentrics, 2 people who refuse to live the way they're supposed to, but by the film's end, we see that they live fully in ways of their own choosing." And see, like, that's what I mean. Like, there's 2 sides of it. There's the side that I kind of more so stand in, which is these are women who live by their own means and their own rules, no matter what society told them was correct. And I think how to pay the cost of that a little bit, but also there's a side that is like, this is exploitative. This is wrong. We shouldn't be showing these women, period, on screen. And would we be even showing them if they weren't related to, again, one of the most well-known historic women in American history? Like I said, I lean more one way, but I do see the points of the other side. So this film has a lengthy, a lengthy legacy in history. So the film, as I said, was released in 1975, and since then, there has been a musical made about Grey Gardens called Grey Gardens that was debuted on Broadway in 2006 and starring Broadway diva Christine Ebersole, who won a Tony Award for playing Little Edie. And the musical also won a few other Tony Awards too. I believe it won Best Musical. Did it? Did I write that down? I didn't write that down, but I'm pretty sure it did win Best Musical, or it was nominated for Best Musical. In 2006, Albert Mayseles released a kind of like a follow-up documentary, if you will, to Grey Gardens called The Beales of Grey Gardens. And this documentary is just basically footage that they did not use in the movie, in the original Grey Gardens. So it's just kind of like, it's just like, here's what you didn't see. And it is truly just as lovely and colorfully dark as Grey Gardens, the first one that came out, was. There's a lot more singing and dancing, if I recall, from The Beales of Grey Gardens. And that is on YouTube, I believe. I will link that below so you can watch that as well. In 2009, HBO did a scripted film about Big and Little Edie called Grey Gardens. And it starred Drew Barrymore as Little Edie and Jessica Lange as Big Edie. Now, I always tell people they should actually watch this before they watch the documentary if they've never seen the documentary. And I'll tell you why. Because the documentary, as I said, you really are just like thrust in the world of the Edies. And it can be really kind of it is very jarring and maybe even a little confusing. Like, it's like, why are we watching this? What is going on? Who are these people? I mean, they're great. I want to have them over for dinner, and let them, entertain everyone. But like, why am I watching them? Who are they? Whereas this HBO movie gives a in-depth backstory of how they got to Grey Gardens, how they got to the place that they ended up being in before the Mayseles Brothers came into their lives. And it does paint a full picture. I've shown Grey Gardens to, I remember in college, I showed Grey Gardens to 2 friends, very different friends. And they both had that same reaction of like, this is so fascinating, but what is going on? I have no idea what's happening. And then I told them like, oh, you should watch, if you're interested, watch the HBO movie. And once they watch the HBO movie, they're like, I get it now completely. And I wish I had watched that first. So once I got into the documentary Grey Gardens, I would know really what was going on. And so now I tell people all the time, like, hey, you should watch Grey Gardens, but before you do that, watch the HBO movie. And the HBO movie did very, very well. Drew Barrymore won a Golden Globe for her performance as Little Edie, which I stand by that was Drew Barrymore's greatest performance, period. And Jessica Lange won the Emmy Award for Best Actress in a Miniseries or Made-for-TV Movie for her performance as Big Edie. And again, I mean, it's Jessica Lange. I think kind of goes without saying that when in doubt, Lang is gonna lang it out. 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 Shh, 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 shh. This is gonna fall in my hand. Grey Gardens has also been mentioned in very popular television series like 30 Rock, and also is mentioned in the television series The New Normal. Very famously, Jinx Monsoon, who is the winner of season 5 of RuPaul's Drag Race and season 7 of All Stars All Winners. She portrayed her on her first Snatch game in season 5 and ended up winning, which was a really big deal. I remember people kind of actually pinpoint, especially my generation, that is when they learned about Grey Gardens and when they developed an interest for Grey Gardens. There also was a television series from IFC called Documentary Now that each episode parodied or satirized famous documentaries, and they did one about Grey Gardens called Sandy Passages, which is a great episode if you haven't seen it. It's so good. It really plays into almost like the horror aspects of Grey Gardens. And I think there could be a really good argument for how Grey Gardens is actually maybe even a horror film in a lot of ways, and they really play into that. It's with Fred Armisen and, is it Seth Meyer? I think it might be Seth Meyer, actually. Either way, really great. Check that out if you want to. And in 2010, Grey Gardens was chosen by the Library of Congress for preservation since they found the film, and I quote, culturally significant, which is a huge deal to be chosen for preservation by the Library of Congress. So, you go, Edies. You go, my friends, my aunties. I love y'all. Mwah. And I'm going to put on my lipstick, and I'll be right back to talk about what happened to the Edies. Oh, hello. I'm back, and I'm in full little Edie mode. I brought out my scarf. I got some brooches put in. I'm serving, mother darling. Mother darling, I'm serving. Who's serving, mother darling? I am. Ooh, and I look good. The makeup turned out good, right? Like, let's look at it. It turned out good. I love it. I love it. So, as I was saying, what happened to the little Edies? Well, okay, hold on. Let me tell you. So Big Edie passed away in 1977 of pneumonia, only about 2 years after Grey Gardens was released. And it's interesting because in the documentary, she kind of alludes to the fact she knows that she's not going to be around for much longer. So I thought that was very interesting that it seemed that she understood that time was ticking for her. So Big Edie unfortunately passed away in 1977 of pneumonia, and about 2 years later in 1979, Little Edie sold Grey Gardens to Benjamin Bradley, who was the executive editor of the Washington Post, for, I'm not sure exactly how much, but she made a promise to her mother she would not sell Grey Gardens as a teardown. So Benjamin Bradley bought it as it was and fixed it up. And Grey Gardens is actually still standing today. I'm pretty sure it has been restored to its original glory by its owners, and they have tried to really maintain Grey Gardens to kind of resemble what it did look like in its golden age and era. Little Edie lived and moved around for a little bit longer. She had her own cabaret show, so she did get her own cabaret show. This show, which happened in 1978 for 4 nights and 8 performances, so 2 a night. Good for you, Miss Edie. Good for you. That's a lot of work. That's tough. That's tough to do multiple shows in one night. 1 show is enough. 2, a lot. So good for you for doing that. And her one-woman show happened at the famed Reno Sweeney's Club here in New York City. And reviews were what you might imagine. But the club kept the reviews from Edie, so she never really saw them. So I'm sure in her mind was a triumph, mother. Triumph, I tell you, a triumph, mother darling. Little Edie moved around here and there a little bit, but eventually ended up in Belle Harbor, Florida, which is a very affluent area of Miami, and she passed away in 2002. Before Big Edie died, she was asked what she thought of Grey Gardens, and she said, and I quote, "There's nothing left to say. It's all in the film." Alright guys, that was this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around and letting me gab about 1975's Grey Gardens. What a film. What a film. What incredible women. What beautiful, smart, talented, artistic, colorful women. Yes, they went through some things, but my God, they persevered and they resisted, and they kept going. And I salute my scarf to you, big and little Edith Bouvier. I'll tip this brooch to you, big Edie, and this one to you, little Edie. If you are interested in watching Grey Gardens can be streamed on HBOMax and Criterion Channel. Criterion, you know, movies tend to come and go on Criterion, but there's those staple Criterion ones that never leave, and Grey Gardens really is one of them, so it will always be on there as far as I know. Well, how do I know? I'm not in charge of programming. If I was, Marilyn Monroe would be on there way more, but we digress. And if you don't have those platforms and are interested in renting Grey Gardens can be rented on multiple different platforms. Actually, you know what? I do believe that Grey Gardens and the Beales of Grey Gardens allegedly are available to watch for free on YouTube. If they are, those links will be down below. I know Beales of Grey Gardens is, so I will definitely link that below. And please, again, like and subscribe if you are interested in following me on my socials. My Instagram is them_fatal. And my Twitter and TikTok is at themfatal93. And I promise I will be back sooner than I was before. I'm ready. I just feel so good. I feel good. I feel ready to really make more and more content for you guys here on YouTube. And I'm so excited. I have a lot of movies that I'm thinking about doing. And I can't wait to talk about more classic films with y'all while doing an average job of doing my makeup. Alright guys, have a good day, or a good evening. Whenever you're watching this, I just hope you're good. Bye.